the talk, but today I want to start actually with the talk and lead up to the meditation. Um, I'm guessing that all of you, or most of you anyway, attended the Wednesday class with Marvin Anderson and on the 12 powers. And Marvin was a very insightful and interesting man. And I don't really disagree with anything he said, but I am going to talk about the 12 powers system and about the power of faith today. Um, not as not as something that's in contradiction to what Marvin had to say, but to expand or show another sort of a wider view or wider perspective on that idea. And starting with my sense of what unity is, I think that I believe, I want to say I know that unity is a spiritual path. It's a spiritual path to union with divine mind. That's that mysticism that Maya was just talking about. The objective of the unity path, as originally taught by the Fillmores, is to attain this conscious union with infinite mind, with divine mind. We are already one with that. So it's a path of expansion, it's a path of deepening. It's the union itself, the objective, cannot be adequately described. That's really what all the mystics say. There's sort of general descriptions about, well, what happens when you attain this consciousness of union? And it's generally described by the mystics of all traditions, really, as a state of bliss and all pervasive love and an intuitive knowledge of the spiritual reality. Beyond being simply an experience, it's an experience that changes us. It is an experience that changes how we think and feel and express life. And there are different names for what this experience is or what its effect is. And so you find in our tradition that the idea of the Christ consciousness, divine union, the Buddha mind, samadhi in Hinduism. There's different names for it, as Maya pointed out, but they're all, when they get down to what's the experience and how does it change you, they're all sort of basically the same. They're all on common ground. They may use a different word for God and they may have somewhat different synonyms and methods and practices, but at the point of union, at the point of consciousness of what that experience is, they're basically all one, which is appropriate, I think. So what is the unity path? Just briefly, there's different components to this as a spiritual path, just as there are different components of a Buddhist path or a Hindu path or a Christian mystical path. One of the, probably the first thing is this, the study of metaphysics, the study of the nature of reality as truth, right? Well, we need to do the studying in order to get into, for example, the methods, in order to understand what it is that we believe, not only what it is that we believe, but why we believe it. So in a sense, it begins with the study of metaphysics, but that is an ongoing thing. This is not a step-by-step taxonomy, if you will, of unity spiritual path. It is, we might think of it as folds in a flower or dimensions that we are continually working on. So there's a study of metaphysics, number one. There is the observation of your thinking and feeling, your observation of your thinking and feeling. That was the element that Marvin focused on in his discussion, right? That's a very important piece. It's a moving towards a deeper self-knowledge. Another component is just adjusting your thoughts from error to truth. So when you observe, you catch yourself thinking thoughts that you know are not aligned with the truth as you understand it, as you know it, then you shift. You might use an affirmation, you might use a denial, you might simply withdraw your attention from a false idea and bring your attention into a truth, but there's that adjustment that takes place that evolves from our observing of our thinking and feeling. There's inner and deeper work of prayer and meditation. That's a fourth component, if you will, of the unity spiritual path. So we do that work on ourselves, and what we're going to be doing today and talking about the 12 powers is making the focus there a little bit. And then the next component, as I see it, the fifth component, is prayer and meditation for others. generally we start the prayer and meditation work for ourselves, but eventually we begin to participate in prayer and meditation for others. It might be, sort of right into the mainstream of unity prayer by working at Silent Unity. It may be being a prayer chaplain. It may simply be praying for and meditating for others on your own. But at some point, we begin to expand our consciousness of the omnipresence of God and recognize that the truth that we are knowing and feeling within ourselves is the same truth that is in these loved ones that we think of and pray for, pray with. So that's the fifth element. The sixth component or element is following your intuitive calling, doing what is yours to do. This is something that you may know from childhood. Some people do. They know, when they're 5 years old, exactly what their calling is in life. Sometimes we stumble around a little bit and gradually discover it, or gradually unfold it. But at some level, we know in an intuitive way what is ours to do, not just in terms of whatever vocation we might have, but in terms of what is ours to do today, what is ours to do in the midst of the particular conditions that we are in. So we begin to follow that intuition. That's very sort of transcendentalist kind of perspective, right? The self-reliance, the self being the divine self that you discover through inner prayer work. You begin to follow that calling. So that's the sixth component. And the seventh component is kind of what we're doing now, participating in the community. This is a very important piece. There are those whose, I want to say, their orientation and preference in life is to be sort of a hermit, to withdraw from everything, to live and do all of their work in solitude. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a very powerful element to participating in a community. Community is your support group, and you are part of that support group, supporting others in their spiritual work, right? So the community is very important. It's where we learn. It's a part of how we grow spiritually. Okay. So even when there's occasional interpersonal tensions or conflicts or disagreements within the community, that very tension and conflict and disagreement actually supports your growth and supports the growth of others when you understand that challenges are opportunities for growth, right? So you may have these occasional tensions and conflicts within a spiritual community, but that's all part of that path of growing in consciousness. If you're disturbed by what is happening, that just shows you a place of growth, a place where you need to work at growing. And so that's not a judgment. It's sort of, again, it's how we learn. We can think of those things as little quizzes to help draw forth the powers that are within us. So unity is the spiritual path that has these components to it. I think they're fairly obvious when you think about them, right? But it's a path to attain this ever-expanding consciousness of oneness with God. 12 powers is a system within the path. It's something that we use to develop our consciousness. It's part of our metaphysics, and it's an expression in metaphysical terms of the primary powers or qualities or faculties or ability of mind or consciousness. We usually call it 12 powers, but we're really talking about qualities or faculties or operations of consciousness, things that we have in consciousness, ideas that we have in consciousness that we can use, that are part of what consciousness is. And everyone has them, everyone uses them. So really it's a question of, okay, what's the best way to use these things, these faculties of mind or consciousness? As if you were at Marvin's class, you noted he said that the powers are ideas in divine minds. At the most fundamental level of reality, this is an understanding of metaphysics, right? The most fundamental level of reality, the universe is consciousness. The universe is, we want to say, the mind of God. And in that mind are ideas, the things that we perceive, whether we're talking about a flower, a blade of grass, the sun in the sky, the heavens at night, whatever we may perceive, these are all ideas and divine minds standing in relation to each other. Okay? Our perceptions are ideas in our minds. There's only the one mind. When we think and when we feel interiorly, we are perceiving ideas in mind also. So there's that which we consider to be outside the body, if you will, and that which we consider inside the mind, the inner and the outer, but it's all perceptions in mind. What we perceive as the material world is, in reality, a set of ideas in mind. And ideas unfold. This is where what we call energy, vibrations, motion, it's the unfoldment of ideas. Ideas are kind of like seeds in consciousness. They unfold like a flower, or the way a song unfolds from the opening note, or a book from the opening page, or a movie, or the universe itself from what the physicists have called the Big Bang. Ideas unfold. And this unfoldment gives the impression of movement in space and time. It gives the impression of a flow. We can think of it as a flow, the flow of mind. So what we call time and energy are aspects of the unfoldment and flow of ideas in mind. Metaphysical studies help us understand that this is so and why it must be so, to come into this deeper understanding of the nature of the universe. It's a metaphysical perspective, and it's a perspective that is compatible with physical science. In fact, many of the best, the greatest, I should say, physicists have come to the conclusion after relativity and quantum mechanics that the universe is really fundamentally mind, that the old concept of matter just doesn't hold anymore. But in any case, the 12 powers system is a use of these 12 particular ideas. And these ideas have subconscious, are in our subconscious, I should say. They have an energy center. So we're conscious, but they're also subconscious. And there's the subconscious energy centers have a correspondence and association with centers in the body. Sometimes we talk about, where a power is in the body, but that's not, strictly speaking, accurate. The body parts or forms correspond to or respond to the particular ideas. So our emotions, love, and that sort of thing, we feel a correspondence of that energy in the heart, right? It's a subconscious. It has to do with our subconscious beliefs, what's really built in there. Now, in the system, in the 12 powers system, there are some similarities of meaning and ideas between the Unity 12 power system and the 7 chakras of yoga. There's actually more than 7. There's 7 main ones in the chakras in yoga. There's more than 12 and the Unity teaching too, but we have 12 fundamental ones. The systems are not identical though. And I mentioned this, one of the interesting things, as I said, I'm going to talk about faith today. In the yogic system, there's an association of colors with the different chakras. And some Unity teachers and metaphysicians have come up with a color scheme too, but I'm not exactly sure who came up with it or what the basis of it was. I just see it's out there, right? But one of the interesting things is, as it happens, faith in Unity, when we think about the center and the center of the brain, I'll come back to that. Faith is associated with color or royal blue, and the corresponding chakra in yoga is also indigo or dark blue. So that's kind of an interesting thing to me. I don't completely understand the color correlations, but I think that comes from maybe a deeper level or just something that's useful. So in any case, I'm mentioning that because when we get into the meditation a little bit later, we're going to go back to the idea of the power center and the color. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about what faith is from different perspectives. And I'm going to start with the biblical perspective, because that's really where we get our emphasis on faith. We really get it from studying the scriptures. That's where faith becomes a very prominent thing. You don't see it so much in the study of science or nature or philosophy even. You find it in the Bible, especially in our culture. So it's important, I think, or helpful to realize how the word faith is used biblically. So first, in the Hebrew scriptures, the word faith the word that's translated as faith can actually be translated in a number of other ways. So that's helpful for understanding what their sense of what faith was in Hebrew, right? So it can mean trustworthiness, it can mean firm, it can mean stable, it can mean truth. So the word has these synonyms. But an interesting and sort of strange thing is, to me anyway, is that the word faith, or actually faithfulness, is only found twice in the Hebrew scriptures. One would expect it to be there more, but if you look in a lexicon, what you see, it's in there twice, right? Now, that particular word that's translated as faith in those two passages in the scriptures is probably also shows up in other contexts translated in a different way. But the idea of faith or faithfulness is found in just these two passages. In Deuteronomy, it's one of those passages in Deuteronomy 32 where God is sort of, the prophet is saying that God is sort of upset, or in this case it's Moses, that God's upset with the people and says, I will hide my face from them, for they are a perverse generation in whom is no faithfulness. So the first one is just saying people don't have this trustworthiness, this firmness, this stability yet. They don't have this faith. That's in Deuteronomy. And then the other passage is one that's a little more positive, I suppose. It's Habakkuk 2, verse 4, the righteous shall live by faith. The righteous shall live by faith. The Apostle Paul made a great deal of that particular passage and that particular idea. But again, twice in the Hebrew scriptures, the much more prominent word talking about relationship to God in the Hebrew scriptures is the word fear. Now, the word fear, the word that's translated as fear can also be translated as reverence. Again, has some different types of translations. But an interesting thing is the word fear appears 324 times in Hebrew scriptures, 324 times compared to just the 2 for faith. Most of these passages are about fearing the Lord. I'm sure you've all come across those passages and, like me, probably quickly skipped over them. But this idea of fearing the Lord, and as I say, it may be better in a lot of cases to translate the word as reverence, because reverence for the Lord. But if we understand it in context, we can see that faith in the Hebrew scriptures is understood kind of as faith that bad things are going to happen, okay? Or more, the reverence, the idea of reverence of God, a God who punishes and rewards depending upon our obedience or disobedience. So that's the Hebrew scripture concept of our fundamental relationship with God, is to stand in reverence or to stand in fear of this God so that we behave in the ways we're supposed to. If we behave in the ways that we're supposed to, then we'll be rewarded. If we don't, we'll be punished. So in this case, the Hebrew scriptures emphasis is on law. In the New Testament, the emphasis is on grace. So we may think of this as an unfoldment or an evolution of the idea of a relationship to God. In the Greek, the word for faith comes from the word meaning to be convinced or persuaded that something is true, to be convinced or persuaded that something is true. And the word faith appears in the New Testament 244 times. So clearly, there's a great deal more emphasis on this idea of faith, which means to be convinced or persuaded, to trust that it is so. What are we to make of this shift from fearing or reverencing God to having faith in God? Fear and faith both involve trusting that something is true. It's a perception of the present and expectation about the future in both cases. Perception of the present and expectation about the future. Fear and faith, in a sense, are very similar experiences. The difference is that fear expects reward and punishment based on obedience. Faith trusts that God is good in the present and expects good in the future. So faith is a more positive-looking, optimistic, forward-looking perspective than fear. In both cases, it's about what we see in the present and what we expect in the future. But they're different kinds of expectations, and they're based on different things. In the New Testament, the emphasis is on the love and mercy and grace of God. In the Hebrew scriptures, the emphasis is on obedience and fear toward God. So this is an evolution of consciousness. It's, I suppose it's a little bit like when you're a child, your parents might get you to do things because they're just a lot bigger than you. And in that way, you learn to seek reward, avoid punishment. It's only later, as you gain in wisdom, you realize how wise your parents be. If your parents happen to be wise, you grow in faith in them because you see that wisdom and you see that they really do love you, that even the punishment was part of that. Whatever punishments you might have experienced were part of or expression of that love. That's, of course, in an ideal childhood, and I realize not everyone has an ideal childhood, but that's kind of the idea of a growing up in our understanding. Not that God changes, but that our consciousness of God changes. So that's what's happening in that relationship. Now, the book that focuses most in the Bible, that focuses most on the idea of faith, is the letter to the Hebrews in the New Testament. Now, this letter really is an attempt to build faith. It is an attempt to persuade and convince, that idea, that fundamental Greek idea of faith, to be persuaded or convinced. It's a sustained argument from first to last that's intended to persuade people that Jesus is the Messiah. It's aimed specifically at some Jewish members of the Christian community who are thinking about leaving and returning to their old ways, returning to the Judaism that they came out of, okay, and not remaining in Christianity. So it's an attempt to persuade them to remain. In the 11th chapter, we're given a kind of definition of faith, a New Testament, if you will, definition of faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The word substance is also often translated as assurance, an inner assurance. So we're talking about a mental substance, if you will. So the Greek word that's used there can be translated either way, as substance, the thing of what things are made of, the support of things, the essence of things. It also can be, meaning confidence or an inner assurance. That's what faith is in this teaching. And in the book goes on, the Hebrews goes on to list a lot of what it considers miracles or great signs that are a result of faith. It was by faith that Moses parted the sea, that sort of thing. So if you hold an idea firmly, stably, securely in mind, if you are persuaded and convinced that it is true, then that idea is substantial to you, right? It is something that is substantial. It's a foundation to work from. Faith, fundamentally, we all have the faculty of faith. It's the ability to perceive ideas and the ability to accept an idea as true. It perceives or discerns ideas, and then it accepts them as true, even if they are not. It's a particular function or operation of mind. So we can have beliefs that are true, and we can also have beliefs that are false. Our perceptions of the world are formed by the faculty of faith, our beliefs, if you will. So from a metaphysical perspective, your experience is exactly what you believe it to be. Your experience and your beliefs are actually synonymous. They're the same thing. Your belief can be true, your belief can be false, but either way, it's what you are experiencing. So when people talk about my truth, your truth, my reality, your reality, this is my reality, that's not my reality, so on and so forth, these things that are relative to the individual, what we're talking about there really are our beliefs. This is the way we experience the world because this is what we believe. These are the ideas we have accepted to be true. Now, it's possible not only to believe in things seen and interpretations of things seen, it's also possible to believe in invisible realities through faith. Invisible realities, the reality of spiritual dimensions, the reality of God. So that definition of faith was a two-parter: substance of things hoped for, also evidence of things unseen. For Charles Fillmore, this was the most important function or power of faith, that it can accept invisible realities. It can perceive them, okay? Now, another dimension of faith is creativity, right? Some beliefs are creative. These beliefs, the creative beliefs, are neither true nor false in the present, but they can create future experiences. That's the kind of faith or belief that we talk about when we talk about praying sort of for something, praying for healing, praying for prosperity. That's the level of creative belief where we're using faith to perceive an invisible reality and bring it forth, right? So the invisible reality of the idea of health, perceiving it with faith, accepting it as true, becomes the power of faith to heal. Accepting the idea that there is an infinite support of supply or provision in God, God the good. Accepting that as true with the faculty of faith is what creates abundance in our lives, right? So our beliefs can be creative. At a very sort of mundane medical level, it's the placebo effect. A person believing that they've received an effective treatment is then cured, even though what they've been given doesn't actually do anything at all. Doctors have known about this actually for a long time. They used to use bread pills, and then they started using sugar pills, and they just recognized if the person just really needed some kind of hope or some kind of belief that something was being done, and sure enough, the symptoms would dissolve. The placebo effect is an example of using outer things to generate a creative belief. Well, truth is important because true beliefs align with the nature of the universe as it is. And in having a true understanding of the universe, we come into harmony with it. When we understand how the universe works, then we are able to be in harmony with it. When we understand the nature of God, we are able to be in harmony with that. That's what holding true beliefs does. False beliefs are still creative in our consciousness because they're also part of our experience. But what false beliefs do is impose an illusion or a delusion in your experience. These illusions can be pleasant or gratifying, but ultimately they subject you to unexpected disappointment or discord, right? So that's why we want to, even though a false belief might in some way be gratifying to us and be pleasant to us to believe this or that, ultimately holding to that false belief is going to lead to disappointment or put you out of harmony, if you will, as you move, as I'm saying, with the universe. Okay. Now, in Marvin's course, he talked about faith as direction, right? Because creative beliefs, the things we accept as true, such as I can do this, or we simply accept as an invisible idea to be brought into reality. By holding those creative beliefs, it does provide direction for our action. Okay? So faith isn't a simple idle sitting. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it really is about moving forward, doing something based on what you're accepting as true. As I see it, there are basically four levels to faith, four levels of development of faith, four ways that we get faith. And so I want to talk a little bit about those, and you can, I think you'll recognize in your own experience that this is kind of how faith grows. This is how it develops through these kinds of stages. The first stage I call simple, naive trust. Okay. Again, the idea may be true or false, but a simple, naive trust. This is the acceptance of a suggestion without evidence. You accept it without evidence as true. So for example, I'm going to use driving a car as an example involving faith, right? So maybe you see someone driving a car and then you just think to yourself, oh, I can do that. And so at that level of simple, naive trust, you may try. And you may find out that, well, you can't do it just yet because you don't really know how. You might accidentally sort of get it more or less right, but you're more likely to end up in an accident because the simple, naive trust, what you're dealing with is you don't know one way or the other if something's true. You don't have any reason to believe it. You just accept it as true. And most people have a kind of abundance of these kinds of beliefs. We simply trust that something's true. And it's a level of faith, and faith operates, and it's able to have some effect. Right? So that's one level. At another level, and a probably more common level, is a faith based on trust in authorities. Okay? So we accept a lot of what we consider to be our knowledge is simply things that we have accepted based on someone else's authority. our sense of their authority may be based on a number of things. But it's usually someone who has a reputation or a position that we think is respectable, and they must know something, and therefore we trust, right? So I trust and believe that E equals mc squared. I trust it based on Einstein's authority. I couldn't really work out for you why that is so. Although in high school physics, we went through the formula, but I don't remember how it worked, right? There is a way of getting an understanding of it, but right now, I just believe it because I trust that Einstein was right about that, because all the other physicists say so, right? So that a lot of what we call our knowledge is really just based on that. At this level, we don't understand. We just accept, right? But we accept on the basis of authority. So a lot of what we think of as our knowledge and what we believe in, right, more to the point, is based on authority of a parent or a teacher or an author and so on. It's an expert that we consider to be reliable. Okay. So at this level, in driving a car, perhaps a parent or a driving instructor tells you that yes, you in fact you do have the ability to drive a car, and they begin to show you how to drive the car, and you just sort of trust that what they're telling you is the case. Yes, you do this, and then you do that, you turn the key, and so on, you put it in the gear, and so on. So if the teacher is competent, you will probably learn correctly, right? The challenge with, well, it's generally reliable to sort of trust authorities and things. The challenge is that the authorities just frankly are not always right, right? You can get a parent who's not really very good at teaching driving, right? Or even a driving instructor. You might listen to a person who's considered to be an expert, but who in fact has things wrong. Think of how science has evolved. That's exactly what happened. Somebody had authority for hundreds and hundreds of years, and then somebody came along and said, well, wait a minute, you got this just a little bit wrong, and now we have to adjust how we think about the universe, right? So trusting authority is not the ultimate, but it's a progression over simply believing something on the basis of nothing, right? The third level of confidence is based on experience, right? So now you've tried something. You got in the car, you listened to what the teacher is saying, and then you begin to do it. Now you have you have confidence or faith based on experience. This is a deeper and stronger confidence. Oh, I can do this. I am doing this. I have done this. So I know I can do it. There's a lot of things that we do based on experience. I think most, for example, I'm getting a kitchen remodel. I don't have experience with kitchen remodeling, so I'm having someone who does have experience, right? And of course, they do know a lot of what they're doing based on their experience. And sometimes in doing remodeling, they run into things that are unexpected, some things that are new. And so they have to adjust or learn more, I guess you could say, from experience. So that's the third level. This is, level of great confidence based on experience. And then the fourth level, as I see it, is a conviction based on understanding. This is sometimes called faith as knowing, right? When you, again, with the car illustration, you understand the rules of the road and why they're there. You understand how to drive safely in various conditions, partly as a matter of experience, maybe from learning from or reading about. You understand how cars respond when driving on different surfaces, how your car specifically does. And of course, and you may even understand something about repair or fixing things that might go wrong. The more you understand, the less likely you will run into trouble with your automobile and with your driving. You see that? Your faith is a kind of knowing. You now have understanding. This is as high as we can get. Now, at the level of understanding faith, which is again the kind of the level that Charles Fillmore talked about arriving at, the understanding faith. We understand the ideas, we accept them as true, and this is the most substantial establishment of faith in your experience, is to understand. So that's where the power of faith links with the power of understanding. All these powers interact with each other. They don't stand in isolation. Okay? So faith is related to, especially, I think, to imagination and understanding, but it's ultimately related to will and love and all the others in some way. And they are interrelated. It's holistic, right? It's interconnected. So the question isn't really about, getting faith. A lot of times people say, getting faith. Well, it's built into your consciousness. You don't have to go anywhere, do anything to get faith. The issue really is developing it. And the issue is really, what is it that you have faith in? So when we think about those four stages I was talking about, we can think about it in relationship to our understanding of and our relationship to God, right? There's the simple, naive trust. You wonder in your mind as you look around the world, where did everything come from? And you hear from somewhere, well, God made everything. And so you simply accept this idea of God as the creator. You may think of God as like a huge, ginormous person with great big hands who's able to shape stuff into the universe. You may have that sort of idea of God, but it's an idea of God, and it's very simple and, as I say, sort of a naive trust. Okay? And at the next level, now maybe your parents talk to you about God, and you begin to accept authorities about God. So maybe it's your parents, your Sunday school teacher, your minister, the things you read in the Bible, right? You develop an idea of God that's fuller based on the people who are thought to know something about God. You're trusting the authorities, suggestions about the nature of God. Now, again, this can be a wavering faith because generally speaking, what we hear about God, some of it's true, some of it maybe not so true, right? And so we can have a faith or belief in God that's kind of wavering because it's a mixture of truth and error. And so we want to sort that out and get to sort of the next level. At the level where it's wavering, where it's a mixture, people get confused about their experience because they don't completely understand how things work. And so when things don't go the way they think they're supposed to, their faith may waver. They may temporarily lose faith in God. And that's not a bad thing because what they're actually losing is a false idea, which then opens them up to the possibility of getting a true idea. So some of us go through a sort of agnostic phase where what we've been taught by authorities just doesn't really seem to fit, right? And so the next level is really based on experience. Maybe you start to pray. You pray to God for something and some kind of special blessing seems to emerge from that. Or you feel some kind of sense of peace and inner peace from praying. You feel your prayers are answered in some sense. In your experience, this grows the strength and power of your faith. You continue to pray, maybe to know God or to know God's will. And you begin to have inner experiences that persuade you or convince you, yes, God is real. Okay. I may not ever understand everything about God, but I know God is, and God is good, or God is love. You begin to develop an experiential faith in the reality of God and what God is. You reach a level of confidence. At this level, you may still occasionally experience doubts when things don't go right, but your faith is firmer, so you're able to hold to your faith even though you might struggle with the occasional doubts about things. That faith has become more substantial at that level, right? So you continue to study, reflect, pray, meditate. You begin to understand more fully how the universe works and what God is in relationship to the universe. You get an understanding of the nature of God. You begin to have more and more compelling experiences that convince you ever more unshakably of the reality and the nature of God. You perceive God as real, right? So if you have a mystical experience, for example, that will shift you from a that's an experience of God, a mystical experience of God. It's at that third level, but that shifts you into that fourth level that's based on understanding, because the mystical experience gives you an understanding of the reality and nature of God that is deeper than anything else that you can have. So you have this conviction, the understanding faith. And even though you have that, you continue to study, reflect, pray, meditate. You may become a teacher. You could be a teacher at level 3 too, by the way, right? That you have this conviction based on experience, but you get an ever clearer understanding. The thing about this level is it expands indefinitely because God, as infinite, you can continue to grow in faith. There's always room to deepen, develop, expand the power of faith at the level of beyond the level of experience into the level of understanding. So the meditation on the 12 powers is one of the ways we have to expand our understanding by focusing on specific divine ideas and how they function in our consciousness. Every one of the powers has a corresponding physical center in this system. So, for example, we're going to talk about faith. Where's faith located, if you will? Okay, remember, it's not the organ itself, but that's kind of where the energy is felt, as according to Charles Fillmore's experience and that of others, right? So, when faith is located in the center brain, where the pineal gland is, well, you might wonder, well, why is that there? Well, remember that faith is the perceiving power of mind linked to the ability to shape substance. The pineal gland has the structure of an inner eye, and it's located behind the eyes in the center of the brain. According to brain science, the pineal gland is related to the perception of passing time, the regulation of waking and sleeping, the production of melatonin. In other words, it has a regulatory effect on the whole body, and I want to say promotes the health of the body from that center, that very center of the brain. It perceives time, it perceives and produces health. It regulates altered states of consciousness, right? So when people talk about the different states of consciousness, the pineal gland has something to do with that. That's the center of faith, according to Charles Fillmore. And also being at the center, it's linked to it's a convergence of the left brain and the right brain is a way of understanding it, right? So the left brain and the right brain are the lobes, if you will, that operate during imagination or correspond to imagining and correspond to understanding. So faith is sort of in that middle there, linked to it. Okay, so what I want to do now, as a sort of in the closing, is actually to do a meditation using this system, but focusing only on the idea of faith. So I'm going to sort of lead you into that to get going. So I invite you now to find a comfortable position. Take a few moments to feel your breathing and allow yourself to relax so you can focus your attention. Right. First, your attention, as you're focusing on your breathing, is feeling the breath in your lungs. You can shift your attention upward to a point behind your eyes, more or less at the center of your head, right behind your eyes. Just to help you focus there, I invite you to use a little your imagination and picture this power center as a small sphere, an eye-like sphere at the center, and visualize it as emanating light and substance and energy, like a small sun, if you will. We associate the faith with the color blue, so you might want to imagine that light and energy that's moving and radiating in all directions from the center. You might imagine the center as blue and sending out this blue light to the body. This is a way of focusing on the center, that image. Breathe into it. Let your full attention be right there. Kind of third eye inside. Perceive spiritual realities. Now, so as you are visualizing this blue energy and light radiating not only through your whole body, but all around you, it's a kind of aura. I invite you to explore what you now believe and accept as true about God. You do this simply by initially repeating the statement silently, God is. God is. And then allow your subconscious beliefs to fill in what it is that you believe or know, understand God to be right now. God is. Your subconscious fills in those blanks. God is. The ideas that come to you unfold in meaning, and most importantly, in feeling. Experience what you feel. You fill in that blank. God is. This is your faith. This is what you mean if you say, I have faith in God. God is. Let it unfold gently and naturally. If you have some familiarity with power centers, you may sense what Charles called a quickening and energizing of different centers as the radiance of faith moves through your body. You may feel a quickening of the life center, the love center, and others. Perceiving the reality of what they are from this inner eye and this knowing God is. As you feel this, begin to recognize that what God is, you are. God is substance, I am substance, the center of faith. I am. Whatever other ideas come to you, God is, I am. Let your faith deepen and expand as you're knowing your oneness, the divine, with these divine ideas. From the center of faith, you can perceive the inner light. You can perceive health, the idea of health. You can perceive abundance. You can perceive healing, guidance, provision for anyone you pray with from this perspective of faith. So you can bring others into this consciousness and see them as whole and prospered and guided through your power of faith. And now, knowing the reality of spirit, of infinite mind, here and now, working in us and through us, we experience joy, gratitude, enthusiasm, upliftment, a knowing that in all things, God is present. Through Christ, I can do all things. Through the Christ self that I am, I can do all things in my oneness with God. And move forward with confidence, with faith, with gratitude. This is truth. Amen. And bring your attention back to this place. We join together in our spiritual community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Wonderful. I found myself taking notes like a little schoolgirl again. I didn't want to miss a couple of things you said. So thank you very much. I'm stopping the recording. So